A young chef was thrown from a luxury yacht for protecting a trembling puppy, her body swallowed by blue water and summer laughter. A group of rich kids believed the harbor would erase the truth. They thought money, lawyers, and silence could rewrite what happened. But they didn't see the man diving after her, a former Navy SEAL shaped by hardship and guided by faith. When cruelty crossed the line, God moved quietly, and the truth began to surface. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and if this story moves you, please subscribe for more. The harbor shimmered under a merciless summer sun, water flashing blue and white, pleasure boats rocking gently as if nothing in the world could possibly go wrong. Ryan Cooper stepped onto the dock, carrying a dented metal toolbox and the quiet weight of a man who had learned to endure. 35 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, he moved with the restrained precision of someone once trained for danger. His dark blonde hair was cut short, streaked faintly with gray at the temples, and a trimmed beard framed a face marked by sun and long nights. His eyes, calm, watchful, gray, missed very little. Ryan spoke politely to strangers, kept to himself, and worked hard. Plumbing was not a dream, but it paid rent and bought groceries. That was enough for a man who had already lived another life. The call had come early that morning. A luxury yacht stuck at Clearwater Harbor, fresh water system blown, party on hold. Ryan took the job without questions. Jobs were jobs. The yacht loomed white and immaculate against the pier, a floating palace glittering in the heat. Music drifted from its open deck, laughter sharp and careless. Below deck, the engine compartment was stifling. Ryan knelt, sweat running down his spine as he traced the break in a cracked waterline. He worked steadily, methodically, the way he always did, focus narrowing, the rest of the world fading to background noise. Then, cutting through the hum of machinery, he heard something that made his hands still. A small bark. Not playful, not excited. Afraid. Ryan frowned. The sound came again, higher now, trembling. He shut off the valve, wiped his hands on his pants, and climbed the ladder toward the deck. Up top, the sunlight hit him full in the face. He blinked, then saw her. Mia Reynolds stood near the rail, her body angled protectively inward. She was young, early 20s, slender, with olive-toned skin flushed from heat and stress. Her dark brown hair was pulled into a tight bun at the nape of her neck, practical and neat, the way working women wore it when they didn't have time for vanity. Her chef's jacket was clean but clearly second-hand, sleeves rolled to her elbows. There was a quiet dignity in the way she stood, even as her shoulders tensed. In her arms was a German Shepherd puppy, no more than 3 months old. His ears were still too big for his head, one tilting sideways, his coat a soft mix of black and tan. He trembled violently, paws curled inward, amber eyes wide with panic. He barked again, a thin sound swallowed by music and laughter. 3 young men stood in front of Mia, blocking her path. They were sun-kissed and confident, bodies loose with entitlement. One was tall and lean, blonde hair falling into his eyes. Another wore a gold chain and a lazy grin. The third leaned back against a deck chair, arms crossed, watching like this was entertainment. "You can't bring that thing up here," the blonde one said, laughing. "It's a yacht, not a shelter," another added. Mia shook her head, voice tight but controlled. "I'm the cook. I finish service and I leave. He won't hurt anyone." A hand shot out toward the puppy. Mia turned instinctively, clutching the dog tighter. The puppy yelped, pressing his face into her chest. That was when it happened. A shove, harder than necessary, careless, cruel. Mia's foot slid on spilled liquor. Her balance broke. One hand flew back and caught the rail, fingers scraping metal. For a heartbeat, everything froze. Ryan moved. "Hey!" he shouted, sprinting forward. Too far. Mia's grip slipped. The puppy barked once, sharp, terrified. Her eyes met Ryan's for the briefest instant, shock and fear colliding in them. Then gravity claimed her. She fell backward over the rail. The splash was violent, water erupting as if struck. For a split second there was silence. Music faltered. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else swore. Ryan vaulted the rail without thinking. Cold water slammed into his chest, stealing his breath. He surfaced, eyes burning, scanning wildly. He saw Mia first, arms flailing, still holding the puppy above the surface with everything she had left. The puppy whined, legs paddling uselessly. Ryan reached them, wrapped an arm around Mia's waist, shoved the puppy upward toward the ladder. "Hold on," he commanded, voice steady even as his muscles burned. They made it to the ladder in gasping fragments, hands slipping, lungs screaming. Ryan boosted the puppy first. Mia followed, shaking uncontrollably. Ryan climbed last. On the deck, time felt distorted. The three young men stood frozen, faces drained of color, not with remorse but with surprise. They hadn't expected anyone to jump. They hadn't expected witnesses. The sun blazed overhead, unforgiving. Mia sank to her knees, clutching the puppy to her chest. He pressed his nose beneath her chin, shuddering, alive. Tears ran freely down her face now, silent and unstoppable. Ryan stood between her and the others, water dripping from his clothes, jaw set. He said nothing. One of the men opened his mouth, then closed it again. Somewhere above them, a deck camera quietly adjusted its lens, tracking movement. Ryan didn't notice. He was still staring at the rail where Mia's hand had slipped. The deck smelled like sunscreen, spilled champagne, and fresh paint warmed by the sun. But beneath it all ran a sharper scent, salt water on skin, and panic that refused to dry. Mia Reynolds sat on the fiberglass floor with her knees pulled tight to her chest, arms wrapped around the German Shepherd puppy, as if her ribs were the only fence left in the world. He was 3 months old, still all soft angles and oversized paws, black and tan fur clinging in wet spikes, ears trembling like little flags in a storm. His eyes, amber and too knowing for his age, kept flicking to the rail as though the ocean had teeth. Ryan Cooper stood a few steps in front of her, water streaming from his sleeves, boots planted wide, the sun catching the faint gray at his temples and the hard set of his jaw. At 35, he carried the kind of stillness that came from training and loss. A man who had once run toward gunfire, now running toward ordinary cruelty, discovering it could be just as cold. The three wealthy youths didn't rush to help. They didn't ask if Mia was okay. They hovered in a loose half-circle, shirtless, tanned, expensive sunglasses hiding their eyes like masks. The tallest one, blonde, lean, with a smile that never warmed his face, laughed once, a short burst that sounded like a door slamming. The second, broader with a gold chain resting on his chest, rolled his shoulders as if shaking off an inconvenience. The third, dark-haired and restless, kept glancing toward the gangway and the marina beyond, not with guilt, but with calculation. They looked less like boys who had made a mistake, and more like boys waiting for someone else to fix it. Mia tried to speak, but her throat was raw from seawater. She swallowed, then forced out a whisper. I didn't mean to cause trouble." The words tasted like shame, and the shame tasted like childhood, like being told to keep your head down, like learning early that apologies were sometimes demanded even when you had done nothing wrong. Mia had learned to survive by being useful. She could feed people. She could stay quiet. She could work harder than anyone in the room. She believed those things would keep her safe. Standing on that deck, shivering in a damp chef's jacket, she realized they never had. The blonde one took a lazy step closer and flicked his fingers toward the puppy. "You brought that thing up here," he said, voice loud enough to draw attention, but casual enough to sound harmless. "Like with some kind of charity doc." The puppy growled, not brave, just desperate, then pressed deeper into Mia's arms. The gold chain one snorted. "It's a trash dog," he said, and the words landed with the careless cruelty of someone who had never been hungry. Mia's arms tightened. Her eyes stung, not from salt anymore, but from the private grief of loving something the world called worthless. Ryan's voice cut through the heat like shade. "That's enough!" He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His tone carried the quiet authority of a man who'd learned that the loudest person in a room was usually the one most afraid. The boys glanced at him, then at his soaked work clothes, the battered toolbox near the hatch, and something like contempt formed, because money loves to believe it's a different species. "Who are you?" the gold chain one asked, smiling as if he already knew the answer and didn't respect it. "Maintenance?" The blonde one laughed again. "He's the plumber. Look at him." Ryan met their gaze without flinching. The sunlight made his gray eyes pale, almost metallic. Under the beard and the fatigue, there was the unmistakable edge of someone who had been sharpened by hard places. Still, he said nothing about what he used to be. The past was not a badge he wore for strangers. The past was something he carried so it didn't spill onto the people in front of him. Mia's mind drifted, unwanted, unstoppable, back to the night she'd found the puppy. She had been taking out trash behind a restaurant after a double shift, apron stained, feet aching, stomach hollow from skipping dinner. A weak whimper had floated up from a dumpster like a prayer. She had climbed onto a milk crate and looked inside, expecting a raccoon. Instead, there he was, a bundle of fur and bones, eyes crusted, ears too big, paws splayed awkwardly on greasy cardboard. Someone had tossed him away like a mistake. Mia had reached down, and the puppy had crawled into her palm with the slow trust of something that had already learned people were dangerous, but still hoped one might not be. She had taken him home, wrapped him in an old towel, and promised him two things: food and a name. She hadn't decided the name yet. Names felt like luck. Names felt like permanence. She didn't know if her life could afford either. So she called him Baby when he cried, and Brave when he tried to stand. On the yacht, that private memory became fuel. The boys kept talking, circling words like sharks. "Your staff," the dark-haired one said to Mia, voice smooth and thin. "You're here to cook and disappear." He gestured broadly at the glittering deck chairs, the cooler packed with drinks, the bright towels laid out like an advertisement for a life Mia had never owned. Not to bring problems. The blonde one leaned in, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "Do you know what happens to people who embarrass us?" Mia's fingers shook around the puppy's ribs. She could feel his heartbeat racing like a trapped bird. She looked up at Ryan, not as a damsel searching for a hero, but as a person searching for a witness. Someone who had seen the truth. Someone who would not pretend he hadn't. Ryan took one step toward the blonde one, not threatening, just closing distance. It was enough. The blonde one's smile twitched. The gold chain one lifted his hands in mock innocence, a performance rehearsed by privilege. "Relax," he said. And then, because cruelty always wants the last word, he nudged a wet patch on the deck with his toe and smirked at Mia. She can't even stand up without making a scene. Something in Mia cracked, not into rage, but into clarity. She wasn't safe on that boat. The puppy wasn't safe, and no apology would buy mercy from people who treated mercy like weakness. She pushed herself to her feet, legs unsteady, keeping the puppy high against her chest. Her voice came out hoarse, but firm. "I'm leaving." It wasn't a plea. It was a boundary. For the first time since she'd stepped aboard, she spoke like someone who believed she had the right to exist. The dark-haired boy moved fast, blocking her path to the stairs with a casual swing of his arm. "No," he said, still smiling. "You don't get to leave and talk about what you saw. You don't get to make us look bad." Behind him, The blonde one's head tilted, as if listening to a suggestion only he could hear. The gold chain one glanced toward the marina again, toward the busy harbor, the families, the tourists, the sunlit normalcy, and then back at Mia with a look that said he believed the world would always take his side. Ryan's chest tightened. Not fear for himself, he'd lived with worse, but a familiar, bitter recognition. He'd seen this shape before, a pack testing how far it could go, relying on silence as camouflage. He kept his hands open, palms visible, voice controlled. "Step aside," he said. "Let her off the boat." The blonde one's laugh turned sharper. "Or what?" he asked, leaning forward just enough to be a challenge. Ryan felt the old discipline flare, counting breaths, measuring angles. He didn't want a fight. He wanted an exit. Mia shifted her weight, searching for a clear path, and in that moment the puppy wriggled, a small, desperate movement. A soft yip slipped out of him, high and frightened. The sound did something ugly to the boys' faces, like the whine of an animal reminded them there was a living thing in Mia's arms, not just an object to mock. The gold chain one stepped in close, reaching as if to snatch the puppy away. Mia jerked back instinctively. The puppy's paw flailed and caught the gold chain, tugging it. The chain snapped with a tiny metallic pop and fell onto the deck. For half a second, the world held its breath. The gold chain boy stared down at the broken jewelry as if it were a wounded ego made visible. His face flushed. His mouth tightened. He looked up at Mia, and the heat in his eyes wasn't just anger. It was humiliation. And humiliation, in people like him, was a match searching for gasoline. He took a step forward and shoved Mia's shoulder, not hard enough to throw her, but hard enough to remind her who he thought he was. Ryan moved instantly, catching Mia's elbow, steadying her. "Don't touch her," he said, voice lower now. The blonde one's smile vanished for the first time. The dark-haired one muttered something under his breath, something about teaching and lessons. Mia's heart hammered. The puppy began to tremble so violently she could feel it through her own bones. She looked toward the rail, toward the water glittering like a promise and a threat. And she realized, with a sick drop in her stomach, that the ocean wasn't behind her by accident. It was there, like an option. She shifted again, trying to angle toward the stairs, and that was when the blonde one grabbed her wrist, firm, possessive, his fingers digging into her skin as if he could rewrite reality with pressure. "You're not leaving," he said softly, and the softness made it worse. Mia's breath caught. The puppy barked, a sharp, pleading sound. Ryan's shoulders tensed, his jaw working as he fought the urge to do what instinct screamed. He forced himself to be careful, because the wrong move could turn this into exactly what they wanted. A scene with the plumber as the villain and the rich boys as victims. Mia's eyes met Ryan's. In them was a question older than words. Will anyone believe me? Will anyone stand here with me when they start lying? Before Ryan could answer, the yacht's upper deck door opened. A young woman stepped out, drawn by the commotion. She was around the same age as the boys, tall and slim, with glossy auburn hair falling in waves over bare shoulders, a designer cover-up fluttering around her legs like a flag of wealth. Her skin was sun-kissed, her makeup perfect, her expression bored in a practiced way, like someone who had never been surprised by consequences. She looked at Mia, then at the puppy, and wrinkled her nose as if the air itself had become inconvenient. "What is that?" she asked, voice light and cutting. The blonde one turned toward her instantly, eager for approval. "Just a cook causing drama," he said. The young woman's gaze slid to Ryan, lingering on his soaked work clothes, the battered toolbox, the salt water dripping from his sleeves, and a slow smile formed, amused and cold. "Gross," she said, not loudly, not angrily, just as a verdict. Then she looked back at Mia. "Get it off my boat." Mia's stomach dropped. Ryan felt something twist inside his chest, not shock, but the recognition of a pattern snapping into place. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a hierarchy, a game. And Mia, holding a trembling puppy, had accidentally stepped onto the wrong square. The puppy barked again, one small note of defiance, and the blonde boy's grip tightened on Mia's wrist as he pulled her one step closer to the rail. Ryan Cooper walked Mia Reynolds off the yacht with one arm angled protectively at her back, not touching unless she leaned, not crowding unless the boys tried to follow. The marina shimmered under afternoon sun, families strolling with ice cream and sun hats, the ordinary world close enough to hear and far enough to feel unreal. Mia's legs trembled as she descended the gangway, the German Shepherd puppy tucked against her chest like a living compass needle pointing toward safety. He was still damp, fur spiking along his back, ears folding inward whenever a shout echoed from the deck. Ryan noted the way Mia kept her chin level, even as her breath shook. That steadiness, he knew, came from a life where dignity had to be practiced daily, like a skill you sharpened or lost. They paused at the edge of the dock. Ryan shrugged off his soaked work shirt and draped it around Mia's shoulders without comment. He was tall, broad across the back, his posture unmistakably military, even in oil-stained boots and frayed jeans. His beard was trimmed close, not for style but for habit, and a thin scar traced his left eyebrow, an old souvenir from a doorframe in a faraway place he didn't talk about. Ryan spoke politely to most people, rarely raised his voice, and preferred tools to arguments. The Navy had shaped him into someone who solved problems quietly. Leaving the Navy had shaped him into someone who paid the price for doing so alone. Mia whispered thank you and looked down at the puppy, checking his paws, his breathing, the soft rise and fall of his chest. The puppy licked salt from her wrist, then pressed his nose under the collar of Ryan's shirt, burrowing as if he recognized the smell of steadiness. Mia smiled, despite herself, a tired, surprised curve of the mouth. "He's never been on water before," she said. "I didn't know if he'd—" She stopped, unwilling to finish the sentence. Ryan nodded once. He knew the shape of that thought. He had held lives between hands that were never supposed to shake. Behind them, the yacht's music resumed, louder now, insistent, as if volume could erase memory. Ryan didn't turn. He watched the dock instead, the rhythm of people passing, the way truth could be drowned by normalcy if you let it. Mia asked where to go, her voice small but resolved. Ryan pointed to a shaded bench near a bait shop and promised to return with water. As he walked away, the puppy whined softly, then settled when Mia murmured to him, the sound like a lullaby. Ryan bought bottled water and a roll of paper towels. When he returned, he found Mia sitting straighter, shoulders squared, eyes clearer. She dabbed at a scrape on her forearm with careful hands, the chef's precision carrying over to first aid. "I can't go back on that boat," she said quietly. It wasn't fear speaking now. It was certainty. Ryan believed her. He also believed something else, something that made his jaw set. They wouldn't let the story end here. He was right. The first ripple came not as confrontation, but as performance. The blond young man from the deck appeared at the rail with his phone raised, filming the marina like a tourist. He smiled toward the dock, his voice drifting down in an exaggerated tone. "Hey everyone, just a heads up, if you see our cook, she slipped earlier. We're making sure she's okay." His words landed softly, plausibly, and Ryan felt the old alarm ring in his chest. This wasn't an argument, it was the opening line of a script. A woman approached from the yacht's stern, flanked by a deckhand. She was in her late 30s, tall and composed, with dark hair braided neatly down her back and sunglasses perched on her head. Her linen dress was immaculate, her posture managerial. She introduced herself as Caroline Wells, the charter liaison. Her voice was calm, practiced, her smile concerned but distant. "I'm so sorry about the incident," she said to Mia. We've had slippery conditions today. She didn't look at the puppy. She looked at Ryan's boots. If you need medical attention, we can call someone. Mia swallowed. Ryan answered for her, his tone measured. She needs space, he said, and she needs her things. Caroline nodded, as if agreeing, as if she hadn't already decided what would be remembered. Of course, she said. We'll gather her belongings. She turned back toward the yacht, already speaking into her phone. Ryan watched her go and saw the pivot in her shoulders, the shift from concern to containment. The next wave came from the dock itself. A marina security guard ambled over, a middle-aged man with a sun-reddened nose and a badge clipped to his belt. His name tag read Harris. He was average height, thinning hair tucked under a cap, his demeanor friendly in the way of someone who preferred problems to be small. "Everything all right here?" he asked, eyes flicking from Mia to Ryan to the yacht. Ryan kept his hands visible and answered plainly. "A woman fell overboard," he said. "I pulled her out." Harris nodded slowly. "That's so. We were told she slipped." The words were neutral, the question already half answered. Mia's stomach tightened. She opened her mouth, then closed it, the old habit of caution tugging at her. Ryan felt the moment stretch. He remembered rooms where truth needed a witness to breathe. "She didn't slip," he said, still calm. "She was pushed." Harris raised an eyebrow, not in disbelief, but in weariness. "Sir," he said, lowering his voice, "that's a serious claim." Ryan met his gaze. "I know." Harris glanced toward the yacht, where Caroline stood speaking to two of the young men, their heads close together, gestures small and precise. "Let me talk to them," Harris said. "We'll sort it out." While Harris walked away, Mia's hands shook. She hugged the puppy tighter. "They're going to say I'm lying," she whispered. Ryan didn't answer right away. He watched the choreography unfold, phones out, faces arranged, concern practiced. He had seen this before, not on docks, but in other arenas where power rehearsed innocence. "They're going to say what helps them," he said finally. "That doesn't make it true." Mia looked at him, searching. "Will anyone believe me?" The puppy lifted his head, ears wobbling, and licked her chin as if to volunteer. The afternoon stretched. Harris returned with a measured frown. "We're getting mixed accounts," he said. "Some say there was horseplay. Some say she lost her balance." He shrugged, the universal sign of a problem he hoped would resolve itself. "No one's injured badly. Best thing might be to let everyone cool off." Ryan felt a familiar frustration bloom, quiet, contained. Cooling off was another word for forgetting. Caroline reappeared, holding a small bag. "Miss Reynolds, your belongings," she said. "We'll also need you to sign a brief incident report for our records." The paper was already clipped to a board, pen ready. The language was tidy, neutral, careful. Mia glanced at it and felt the ground tilt. She read the first line and saw the lie embedded like a seed. She shook her head. "I can't sign this," she said. Caroline's smile tightened. "It's just procedure," she replied. "We all want to move on." Ryan stepped closer. "She's not signing," he said. Caroline's eyes hardened for a flicker before smoothing. "Then we'll note refusal," she said lightly, "for completeness." She turned to Harris. "Our guests are shaken. We'll be filing our own report." Ryan recognized the maneuver. Create volume, not truth. Drown the single voice in paperwork. Mia felt suddenly very tired. The puppy yawned, then curled into her arm, trusting sleep in the middle of daylight. She looked at Ryan and saw in him not a savior, but a choice. Someone willing to stand in the uncomfortable space where stories were decided. "What do I do?" she asked. Ryan took a breath. He thought of his small apartment, the bills stacked neatly on the counter, the life he had built to be invisible. He thought of the code he had never unlearned. "We don't rush," he said, "and we don't lie." He reached into his pocket and felt the familiar rectangle of his phone. He hadn't recorded anything yet. He didn't say that aloud. He didn't promise outcomes he couldn't guarantee. He promised presence. As the sun slid lower, the yacht's laughter floated back across the water, louder than before. On the dock, Caroline conferred with Harris, pens scratching, words aligning. The blond young man leaned on the rail and watched Mia with an expression that said he believed time was on his side. Ryan stood between them and the bench, his shadow long on the boards. The puppy slept, one paw twitching. And in that ordinary marina, under perfect light, the first version of the story was being written without Mia's consent. The sun stayed generous the next morning, the kind of summer light that forgave nothing because it revealed everything. Ryan Cooper returned to the marina before most shops opened, the boards still cool beneath his boots. He carried a small canvas tool bag over one shoulder, habit more than need, and a paper cup of coffee gone lukewarm in his hand. He had slept little, not from fear, but from the old engine in his chest turning over, planning, measuring, listening to the quiet places where truth hid when it was being chased. Mia Reynolds waited near the bait shop, hair pulled into a lone knot, her chef's jacket folded neatly on the bench beside her. She looked younger in daylight, freckles bright across sun-warmed skin, eyes still bruised by a night of replaying moments she wished she could rewind. The German Shepherd puppy lay at her feet on a borrowed towel, 3 months old and all angles and velvet. His coat was a soft black and tan, ears too large for his head, paws oversized like promises he hadn't grown into yet. He lifted his head when Ryan approached, tail tapping once against the wood, as if he recognized the sound of steadiness. Mia stood. "They called me," she said quietly. "Caroline did. She said there's a report now, that it's better if I come in and sign so this doesn't get complicated." The word tasted sour in her mouth. Ryan nodded. "Complicated is how they keep control," he said. He didn't raise his voice. He never did when the stakes were real. "We're not signing anything we didn't write." They walked the length of the dock together, not touching, not distant. Ryan pointed out cameras, some obvious, some tucked under eaves, some mounted to poles like indifferent birds. He spoke softly, cataloging angles and times. "This marina runs on habits," he said. "People repeat themselves. So do systems." Mia listened, absorbing the way he broke chaos into parts small enough to handle. It steadied her. She had learned to steady herself in kitchens, where heat and time punished hesitation. This felt different, but the discipline translated. A new face appeared at the end of the pier, an older woman with a sun-creased face and silver hair braided over one shoulder, her posture straight as a mast. She wore a faded canvas vest and carried a clipboard battered by years of use. Her name tag read, Sarah Linden. Sarah was the harbor master, mid-60s, tall and spare, skin tanned to the color of driftwood. Her eyes were sharp, not unkind, and they missed little. She had been raised by fishermen and had learned early that truth mattered because water did not forgive lies. When she spoke, it was with economy. "You're back early," she said to Ryan, then to Mia. "And you're the young woman from yesterday." Sarah listened as Mia spoke, uninterrupted, nodding only once or twice. The puppy pressed his nose to Sarah's boot and earned a brief, surprised smile. "We keep logs," Sarah said when Mia finished. "Movements, malfunctions, radio chatter. People forget that." She glanced toward the slip where the yacht had been berthed, now empty. "They moved her late last night. Maintenance excuse." Sarah's mouth tightened. Convenient. They went inside the small harbor office, walls lined with tide charts and photographs of storms survived.
Sarah pulled a binder from a shelf and set it down. Yesterday's VHF recordings, she said. Routine traffic.
But there was a gap. She looked at Ryan. Someone asked to switch channels. That's unusual. Ryan leaned in, scanning timestamps. His face remained calm, but something sharpened behind his eyes. Gaps were not nothing. They were invitations. Outside, footsteps approached. Officer Harris appeared at the doorway, cap in hand. In daylight, he looked older than he had the day before, his geniality worn thin by a sense that things were slipping beyond his preference for easy endings. "Morning," he said. Sarah met his gaze without blinking. "Morning," she returned. Harris glanced at Mia. "We've got statements," he said, "conflicting ones." He hesitated. The Toyota Company's lawyers called. The word lawyers landed with weight. Mia's shoulders tensed. Ryan spoke before she could. "We're gathering facts," he said. "That's not a problem." Harris sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "It becomes one," he said, "when stories start traveling." Sarah closed the binder. "Stories travel whether you like it or not," she said. "Facts catch up when you let them." Harris did not argue. He looked tired, like a man standing between a shoreline and a tide he didn't command. By noon, the marina had found its rhythm. Ryan walked the docks with his phone in his pocket, not recording yet, just observing. He spoke with a deckhand who remembered laughter at the stern, a vendor who had heard shouting, a retired couple who had seen a body go over the rail and a man dive after without thinking. Each recollection was imperfect. Together they formed a shape. Mia sat with Sarah, learning the language of logs and manifests, the way dates and signatures told stories when voices were ignored. The puppies slept through most of it, occasionally waking to lick Mia's fingers, grounding her in the present. The afternoon brought a change in weather, not clouds, but pressure. Caroline Wells returned, sunglasses on, a new confidence in her step. She brought a man with her this time, tall and polished, his suit light enough for summer, his smile practiced to disarm. His name was Thomas Reed, the charter company's counsel. He had perfect teeth and eyes that weighed rooms quickly. "We'd like to clear up misunderstandings," he said, privately. He looked at Mia as if she were a variable to be managed. Ryan did not sit. "Anything you want to say can be said here," he replied. Thomas's smile held. "There are reputations involved," he said gently. "Careers." Sarah folded her arms. "So are there injuries," she said, "and lies." Thomas's gaze flicked to her, recalibrating. He produced a document and slid it across the desk toward Mia. "A settlement," he said. "No admission of wrongdoing. Assistance for your trouble." Mia looked at the paper, then up at Ryan. The puppy stirred, sensing the shift. She pushed the document back without touching it. "I don't want your money," she said. Her voice did not waver. "I want the truth." Thomas's smile vanished. He gathered his paper. "Then you're choosing a harder road," he said. Ryan nodded once. "We know," he replied. As they left, Sarah exhaled. "They don't like witnesses," she said. Ryan checked his phone. Messages had begun to arrive, short videos, grainy but clear enough to show bodies and motion, a dive, hands reaching. Someone had posted, not him. He showed Mia. Her eyes filled, not with fear this time, but with relief. The water remembered. So did the people who had seen it. By evening, the marina hummed with a different energy. Phones buzzed, faces turned toward the dock. Harris returned, this time with a different posture, his cap squared. "We're opening a formal investigation," he said. "External." Sarah nodded. Ryan felt the shift settle, cautious and real. Mia took a breath she felt for the first time since the fall. She looked down at the puppy, who blinked up at her, ears crooked, as if asking what came next. Ryan watched the sun lower, the light turning everything honest and fragile. He knew better than to celebrate early. He had learned that momentum could stall, that power did not like to be embarrassed. He also knew this: the story had moved beyond the yacht. It had found the shore. Morning arrived without drama, the sky already bright, the air warm and forgiving. Summer had a way of pretending that wounds healed faster under sunlight. Ryan Cooper knew better. He stood at the edge of the marina before the crowds returned, hands wrapped around a paper cup, watching reflections tremble across the water. The harbor looked unchanged, but he felt the difference. Like a room after the truth has been spoken aloud, quieter, steadier, unwilling to return to the lie. Mia Reynolds joined him a moment later. She wore clean jeans and a soft cotton blouse, her hair loose and sunlit, freckles scattered across her cheeks like small constellations. She looked rested for the first time since the fall, not because the fear had vanished, but because it no longer ruled the room. At her feet, the German Shepherd puppy, 3 months old, all clumsy limbs and earnest eyes, sat alert, tail thumping whenever footsteps passed. He had learned the dock overnight, memorizing smells and shadows, a tiny guardian learning his world. Mia had named him Harbor, not for where he came from, but for what he represented, a place that held you when the water tried to take you. Ryan noticed the change in himself, too. He had lived years in narrow margins, paycheck to paycheck, choosing quiet jobs that didn't ask questions, carrying the discipline of the Navy like a folded flag inside his chest. He had believed solitude was safety. Standing there now, he felt something loosen, not the past, but the grip it had kept on his future. The investigation moved with a calm efficiency that surprised the marina. Officer Harris returned with 2 plainclothes investigators from the county, a woman named Elena Morales and a man named David Chen. Morales was in her early 40s, athletic, dark hair pulled into a practical bun, eyes direct and attentive. Chen, a few years older, wore wire-frame glasses and carried himself with measured patience, his voice soft but precise. They did not posture, they listened. They asked the same questions twice and wrote everything down. They treated Mia not as a problem to be managed, but as a person whose memory mattered. Sarah Linden, the harbor master, brought out logs and recordings with the satisfaction of someone who had waited a lifetime to see the right tools used well. She stood tall beside Morales, her weathered hands steady on the counter, recounting channel switches and timestamps, the way patterns spoke when people tried to silence them. Witnesses returned on their own, vendors, retirees, a young deckhand with a nervous smile, each adding a thread. Together, the threads became rope. By noon, the yacht's owners had stopped calling. Their lawyer did not reappear. The charter company released a statement that tried to sound neutral and failed. It spoke of cooperation and regret, of internal reviews and policy updates. The marina responded with facts. Video angles were released, timestamps aligned. The story found its spine. Ryan watched Mia sign her statement, hands steady, eyes clear. Harbor chewed gently on the corner of the clipboard strap, earning a smile from Chen. "Good dog," he murmured. The puppy beamed, convinced praise was his birthright. The consequences arrived without spectacle. The county announced charges related to assault and obstruction. The yacht was seized pending proceedings, its polished deck suddenly ordinary, stripped of the laughter that had pretended it was untouchable. Names that had sounded important yesterday became footnotes by afternoon. The marina did not cheer. It breathed out. A week later, the harbor hosted a small gathering at sunset. It was Sarah's idea, framed as nothing more than a thank you to those who had spoken up. Folding chairs appeared. Someone brought lemonade. The air smelled of salt and citrus. Mia stood near the rail with Harbor at her heel, watching the light soften. She wore a white chef's jacket again. Not the one from the yacht, but a new one, sleeves crisp, name stitched cleanly over her heart. An announcement followed, brief and unembellished. A local restaurant group had offered Mia a position, head chef at a waterfront bistro reopening after renovations. They cited her skill and composure, the way she had handled pressure with grace. Mia accepted without a speech. She let the applause wash over her and fade. What mattered was the work ahead, the rhythm of a kitchen, the honest heat, the promise that effort could build something good. Ryan stayed at the edge of the gathering, comfortable in the background. He had returned to plumbing the next day because pipes did not care about headlines. Work steadied him. Yet something had changed there, too. A marina contract came through, repairs and upgrades, steady pay. Sarah had recommended him without ceremony. "You show up," she had said. "That's enough." As dusk deepened, Mia crossed the deck toward him, Harbor trotting proudly beside her. She stopped close enough that Ryan could smell citrus on her skin. "I didn't get to say thank you," she said. "Not properly." Ryan shrugged, the familiar reflex. "You did," he replied. She shook her head. "No," she said gently. "You stood when it was easier to step aside." She reached out, hesitated, then rested her hand briefly on his arm. It was enough. They walked the dock together as the chairs folded and the last of the lemonade disappeared. The water held the day's light a moment longer, then let it go. Harbor paused to watch his reflection, puzzled and delighted, then trotted on. Weeks passed. The bistro opened to full tables and warm reviews. Mia found her stride, her food honest and generous, her kitchen calm, even when the tickets piled high. Harbor grew fast, ears settling, paws still too big, sleeping under prep tables and greeting regulars like an ambassador. He learned the rhythm of service, the hush before the rush, the music of knives and laughter. Ryan's days filled with work that paid on time and nights that no longer felt empty. He fixed leaks and replaced lines, learned the names of the fishermen and the rhythms of tide schedules. Sometimes, after closing, he joined Mia on the deck behind the bistro. They spoke of ordinary things, menus, weather, a loose faucet that needed attention. They did not rush the rest. Some promises kept themselves. At summer's end, the harbor hosted a festival. Lanterns floated, children ran, music drifted. Ryan stood with Mia and Harbor at the rail, watching reflections multiply. The puppy leaned into Ryan's leg, solid and warm. Ryan rested a hand on the dog's head, feeling the steady thrum of life beneath his palm. He thought of the man he had been, careful, alone, convinced that staying quiet was the same as staying safe. He looked at the woman beside him, the harbor alive with light, and understood the difference. The water moved as it always had, patient and honest. This time, it kept what mattered. Sometimes miracles don't arrive as thunder or fire. They come quietly, through the courage to stand up, the hands that reach into cold water, the truth that refuses to stay buried. God does not always stop the storm, but He sends strength into ordinary people so they can become shelter for one another. In daily life, we may feel small, unseen, or afraid to speak, but faith turns small choices into life-changing moments. If this story moved your heart, remember, kindness is never wasted, truth is never forgotten, and God is always at work, even when we don't see it yet. Please share this story with someone who needs hope, leave a comment with your thoughts or prayers, and subscribe to the channel so more stories of faith, courage, and justice can reach the light. May God bless you, protect you, and guide your path, today and always. Amen.